welcome once again on this panel. Same game, different music. Maybe it is the most lovely one between the game audio designers and composers. So looking forward to this discussion. My goal is also to somehow link the people or the audience into the discussion, so later we will have enough, hopefully enough time slots for some questions. So firstly, I would like to ask the audience how many audio and non-audio guys are here. Firstly, please, the audio guys, audio related. Okay, and the non-audio related, it's like 30% of audio and 70 non-audio. That's quite good. Great, so let us show some behind-the-scenes stuff into composing processes. These three brutally professional composer guys have prepared a custom musical piece for a video game which will be announced soon. And don't forget to Nataliya Radina, who is actually who also did some composition instead of Ressa, who got the COVID, unfortunately. So I will represent Nataliya. Maybe I'm not look so beautiful as Nataliya, but I will try to do it. So yeah, let's move on the introduction. So thank you very much. You introduced ourselves, but maybe guys, you should tell a long story short more about yourselves. David, maybe you could start.
Okay. Mic check. Okay. For me, I'm an audio designer, composer, full-time, working on Volcanoids, which is a Czech steampunk survival game. I spend most time on that, composing the music, doing the sounds, implementing them, testing them in Unity also. And besides that, I'm a guitarist. I've been a guitarist since I was a kid. I'm doing concerts, I'm teaching guitar, and I'm also recording studio pieces. And that's mostly what I do these days. I don't want to talk long about myself. We have a cool program ahead, so I'll just pass on to my colleague.
All right, so my name is Tom. I am from the Netherlands, and I am a composer. And originally, I wrote music for films, animation, documentaries, also for the stage. And recently, I've started making the transitions to games as well. And I really love the extra creative challenge that comes when you apply interactivity to what I was used to writing linear music. I wrote a lot of orchestral stuff, as you will hear in a moment. And I worked together on a game with Daniel, who is next.
Yes, hello, my name is Daniel, and I have been lucky to work on some big games like Back 4 Blood and for Wolfenstein Youngblood. And for Back 4 Blood, then I was given the title Sound Artist, and it actually hit me. I actually like the word sound artist. So from that day on, then I just wrote on my resume and my portfolio, I'm a sound artist, because I do sound design, I'm a composer, and I do everything in between. And for the game that I worked on with Tom, then I did all the technical side. Then I didn't do any sounds at all, but just all the programming.
And saved my ass on multiple occasions.
Yeah, and Nataliya Radina is working in the studio Gameowdio with Ressa, and she's doing sound design and the music composition. Hopefully you can find her work on LinkedIn and other social media sites. So let's start to talk about the main topic. Why are we here now? So all the composers got the same video from a gameplay of a video game, and the goal was to compose custom music. All the people had the same stuff. So let's see how everybody of you or every one of you took your pieces. So maybe we will start to, or we will show the game, if you agree, without no sound. Everybody can just make some creative brainstormings by yourselves, and then we can move on the composition. So
Shall we move out of the way of the screen?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Without sound, I'm not sure the sound is now turned on. I mean the sound from the computer. I will. Okay, the first idea, does anybody have any idea, just for one musical instrument, what would you use for one free beer today on the party? Not of the panelists, but anybody of from the audience. One.
King's music or some electric space vibes.
Okay, you have a small beer today. Let's move on. Sorry? Okay, second beer. Great, as you have seen, it's a spacey game, but I have decided not to describe the game right now, because maybe we will infect some ideas. Let's move on the composition. All the guys will introduce or just show their mindset during the composition, and later then we can come back to the game, which genre should be or could be the most fitting. So David, your turn. Do you want to tell something, your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings when you have seen first this video?
Yeah. Okay, well, now we've all seen the video. It seems that there's not much happening at first glance, but it's a mistake, I would think, because it's a challenge. This game is called Galactic Merchant. It's probably about economical management and building ships and monitoring your probably empire. So you'll be counting a lot, clicking a lot, and spend a lot of time in the UI screen, which is moving, cycling. So I immediately thought that I want to somehow express these cycles that are there. I wanted to support that feeling that you are like in a loop and that you need to actually like work. I've played these kinds of games and it sort of feels like you're working at times, because it's not that it's not enjoyable. It's a kind of game for a kind of interest, and it's also this type of game. So the cycles could be expressed, of course, with some kind of a rhythm. So I started thinking and hearing some rhythms in it. Mostly I was sure they have to be steady and sort of like repeating into themselves so that they seem like cycles and not like dramatic rhythmic sequences or anything like that. There is no real combat action or conflictive action. So that was the first question I asked myself: what's the action? That's cycles. And the second question was the aesthetics. What's there? What colors are there? What does the space look like? And what instruments or melodies I might hear when I look at the screen, especially at the background screen where you have the sun, I think, and the cycling devices and spaceships around it. That was kind of inspiring to me. And I've heard several instruments could live there, high-pitched, high-frequency, also cyclically repeated. I'll probably talk more about the instruments I've picked for those frequency areas, but I've chose it because when I saw these movements and the stars, I felt that those flickering lights are really thin tones in higher frequency range. And yeah, that's basically the gist. And then we maybe can play the version I made, and I can talk more about it, because now I would talk a lot, and probably you wouldn't have the idea what's going on, because it's
yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. Cool. So please. Okay. Thanks. Can you put the volume up, please? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sounds like the next one.
Sorry.
Okay. Now that you've heard it, I can reflect on the rhythms, which you've probably analyzed and heard. The different frequency layers are basically cycling, and the bed is made out of double bass, which is played called legno or legno, but it's in Italian legno, which is probably some of our audio guys know, but it's a performance technique where you play the strings with the wooden part, with the reverse part of the bow, so you create this slapping percussive effect. That's in the double basses there, which basically start from the beginning, along with pizzicati and also corlegnos in violins and violas. That's mostly what happens as the cycling bed that is there. And that was how I started writing the music, with this. And I tried to figure out, while I was playing, which harmonies I want to hear, because I wanted to keep it sort of mysterious, sort of like in the shadows, dark, but definitely not depressing or like thriller-esque, anything like that. And as I was developing this cycling sequence, which is basically made up of these strings, I felt that I want to deliver some kind of sustained melodic development that would push the music in those 15 seconds somewhere else, a little bit of a different place. So I stepped in with woodwinds, it's alto flutes, it's regular flutes, clarinet, and a bassoon, bassoons that are playing there, but they are sort of melded into this texture, because they blend very well with the sustained strings later, and also with a synth bed that's below it. At the end of the video, where you heard the long sustained string chords, those also have some beds between below them, and that's what I felt was missing when I was already thinking like I can finish the mix, it's done, and it wasn't, because these strings just sounded like strings. And for the space setting, it didn't really work much. So I use Zebra for synth design. I try not to use presets, but in the end of the day, we all use some presets, of course. Usually, what happens is that I find a preset, I change it, modulate it, and stuff. This wasn't a preset. These beds I built from scratch myself, because I really loved the Zebra sound. Every synth has its own sound, sort of how it oscillates and creates the frequencies, which is weird, but it's that way. This is a digital synth, and I got it because because it was advertised somewhere, and I listened to it, and then I saw a video where Hans Zimmer is using it, and Hans Zimmer is basically half developer of this. So then found out later, and it's a great synth. It's might be a little complicated at times, but in that synth, I don't want to be too deep into the music, but there are a few audio guys, so I want to share at least some stuff about it. It's 4 different waves which are modulating between each other, mostly sine waves, and that's what makes up for the beds. And they sound super large, and the space reverb that is in Zebra is like the algorithms make a really large space, the largest I've maybe heard so far. Maybe I've heard in Valhalla plugins a little bit more of a space, but it's definitely up there. And one thing about the rhythm I've noticed also during the listenings is that the bed made out of double bass and several other instruments isn't enough. It's the bulk of the information in the high frequencies was very busy, and the low frequencies were pretty poor. And when that happens, usually people don't know it, but they feel it, and they don't think the piece works because there's no balance in the EQ. So I opened up Zebra again, and I made an arpeggiator for it and set it up for the same rhythm as the double bass was. And I tried to make it still to feel as real as possible, so it sort of sounds like a little bit slapping on a wooden thing, besides being an arpeggiated sine wave, basically. I'm not sure if we could have heard it here, but anyways, stylistically, this is a combination of orchestral and hybrid electronic elements, as most of today's music. But I wanted to keep the focus mainly on the strings and the pizzicati to express the stars and the flickering. And yeah, that's maybe the gist of what I was working on in there, I guess. And
can I ask you a question?
You can.
Okay,
you
great.
can ask me.
There's at the beginning, within all the rhythms, I liked it, by the way, just to get this off my chest. At the beginning, there was, within your rhythms, also a melodic fragment in those rhythms, like it was a tin, 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 something like that. I don't remember the exactly.
Yeah.
Did you also approach it from, I also want to have some kind of a motive in here that we can recognize that we could use in multiple points? Because I thought it was really clever in that way, because you were talking about these cycles and these rhythm things, to have a motive that is very rhythmical, which you can then, like, let's say, in a later part of the game, let come back, but very subtly, in a way. Is that something you also thought about, or what were the other thoughts behind that little melodic motive?
It's great that you actually noticed. Thank you. Yeah, it's yeah. This is a motive that is played by the viola section, and it's entirely in col legno pizzicati, and it's a motive that repeats until the 30th second, and then it breaks and it goes into the sustained long pads. And yeah, this is actually a repeating motive. It only adapts a little bit in terms of the intervals and the tones that are in there, depending on how the harmony evolves later. But it still repeats the same mathematical, like, note distance so that you can get used to it. Yeah, it's a nice question. Thank you.
Yeah. Basically, for me, also that was the most surprising moment when the pop-up windows went. Disappeared, and then you move to orchestral legato, especially, or to be honest, this is something what I expected from you, that you will choose some orchestral ways to do there, so yeah.
I'm sick anyway, I must use the orchestra all the time.
Okay, quite good piece. I think we can move on, and then if you agree, we can come back to it later, or we can discuss or compare with others. What do you think? Any questions? Or we will keep the questions later? Okay. Great, let's move on. Tom, could you please tell us some introduction, some of your mindset, thoughts, feelings before the composition?
Sure. So, yeah, like we've already mentioned it, as you can see, there's not a lot happening in this video. So then you start to see, usually you have like some points that you can hit where you can make edits in the music, where you say, oh, here I can go another way. And in this one, you only have one, which is when the menu closes. So I also decided to have to approach this as if I were pitching for this game. Like, what would my ideas be if I were pitching to write music for this game in its entirety? And I used this first part where the menu is open and you're clicking to try one idea and the other to try another idea and then blend them together. It sounds now like I'm doing two different things, but you'll hear it goes over in each other. And for the clicking part, which is where you do the detail work, you are managing your ships, you're managing ask and demand, and this is where you micromanage. So I have a somewhat similar approach to David, is that I used shorter notes to convey this ticking of values, and you go into detail, so your notes get shorter as well. And then when we go to the view of space, you go to macro management. So you see, okay, you have an overview of your empire, and this is what's happening on a grander scale. So in the music, I try to do the same thing. That's in terms of strategy, and I think it would be interesting to hear about the instruments I used after we've heard it, so I can explain it. But keep this in mind, so it's short micromanagement, longer notes, empire management, let's say. So I think we can now play the clip.
Yeah, as you said, when I have seen the video first time, I was also thinking about what kind of music would I do here, especially for the clicking part. That I guess it was the most difficult part, how to manage the musical background and not to distract the players. So, yeah, let's see the Tom's piece. Oh, sorry. What's happening?
Joe's silence.
Okay.
Thank you. I hope you were able to hear that correctly. So I chose to use orchestral music for two reasons. The first is I'm a big orchestral guy, so I'm going to do what I'm good at, especially if I have one day to compose this. And the second is that it keeps you kind of grounded in what we know from Earth, if I put it in the context of this game. So it has some familiarity to it, but then to make it otherworldly, make it extraterrestrial, make it science fiction, I chose to pick some instruments which are, we call them auxiliary instruments to the orchestra. So in the orchestra you have, for example, in the woodwinds, you have flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, but then there's also the bass flute, or the English horn, which is like a lower oboe, or bass clarinet, those kinds of instruments. So they are similar in their sounds, but still you don't really expect them there. So there is, for example, there's a bass flute carrying the melody in the end. I have a lot of English horn stuff. So in that way I try to keep it familiar, but still have this otherworldly atmosphere. And another way how I try to achieve this is by having playing techniques which are not natural. Well, they are natural, but they are not common to the instrument. So in the beginning, there's this eerie high sound effect going on, and which is a bass flute multiphonic. And the multiphonic is A flute is a monophonic instrument, which means it only plays one note at the same time. But it has, if you blow it in a certain way and have your fingers in a position in a certain way, it produces two notes at the same time, which a lot of people don't like to listen to, but I think it's great for sound effects. So that's one thing I used. On the other hand, I have some colegnos in there as well that David already explained. For the harp, you usually just pluck the harp, but there are harmonics where you hear higher overtones, and it has a little bit of a darker quality as well. And one of the main instruments that was carrying the atmosphere in the larger part was a harmonic glissando on a cello, which is where you lightly touch the string, and you go up and down, and it goes through the entire overtone series, which means that, how am I going to explain this? That you hear like the root of the string with all its chord tones that come from there. So if you have a piece that is in C, for example, you can use the C string, and then it gives this great eerie effect, which keeps it all together in this same key center, so to say. I hope that's clear. If not, I will be happy to explain it in more detail after the panel. But it has a great eerie synthy, but it's not synth in itself, atmosphere. So in that way, I try to put this otherworldly atmosphere that the game provides into orchestral instruments, to have it grounded, but at the same time weird in a way. And then for the shorter part, yeah, like I said, it's shorter notes. It's a bit more repetitive, but as soon as you close the menu and you see your entire empire, that's where we go into the larger melodies. I'm also a very thematic writer, so when I would pitch for a game like this, I would try to find some place where I can put something of a melody in there, and it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out, but it could be like, okay, this is what a start of a melody could sound like, or this is what the core of the melody could represent, and this is what it will sound like and what the atmosphere is. And put it all together, and that's what you get. I hope that's clear. If not, we have, well, shoot me, or you can ask later at the end of this panel.
Yeah, great, especially the user interface part. How you done is, as I remember well, you had some arpeggiator there, right? Like or
it was there was later.
It was later.
It's all orchestral. I don't have synths, but later I have a flute line which has a delay on it. I cheated. I'm sorry. I did one plugin, okay. Which is it gives this otherworldly atmosphere to the flute,
okay.
Which is descending line. I think is what you mean, right?
Yeah. And what is very interesting that we have seen the same video with two different music, right? And with your one, the second part I felt more like, I don't want to tell preparation for combat, but maybe some combat will come later, right? And this is very interesting, and basically our goal to show how the music can affect the same game, right? So we have seen just 2 times the same video with different music, and I don't know what are your feelings, but my feeling is that the second part was like, okay, I finished the user interface stuff, and then we will just go smoothly colonize and move on, right? But let's see if you agree.
I just want to say that's what I try to do. It's like the micro and the empire management to kind of separate the two in the thing I did. Yeah. So it's good that you got that same impression, so I'm glad.
Yeah, great. So let's see the third one, and not the last one for sure. How we'll change another musical mood or ideas or thoughts still now. So, yeah.
Should I talk about before? Or?
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah. So I know that Tom is he's a great composer, and he's a fantastic orchestrator, because that sounded great, and he had really big control of the orchestra and all its sounds and frequencies.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I knew from the start that I would take a completely different approach. So my approach was to record all the sounds myself. I have recorded some of my saxophone first of all, and my clarinet that I have pitched down like 3 octaves via an old hardware sampler, Roland S330, which sounds fantastic when it's like 2 or 3 octaves down. Then it's dark and grainy, and then I use that as a texture and as a sub bass, basically. then also have this antique cash register that's 150 years old that I have recorded 8 gigabytes of sound of. I made a sound library out of that, so I used a lot of those sounds, especially for the written part, and also just went nuts with trying some new plugins. I took this opportunity to try a new plugin in Reaper that I haven't seen before. It's called S.r.o. Sorry, and it's a kind of a granular synthesizer where you can do some really weird delay, and you can do some really trippy space reverb. Yeah, so I assembled that, and I assembled a bunch of other things, which I cannot exactly remember now, but I will probably when we see the clip.
Yeah, great. So
yeah, just one more comment actually. Just before we see it, I had kind of the same approach to this video as Tom did. That I didn't see it as gameplay footage per se. I took the opportunity to see it as a kind of a gameplay trailer and to showcase which kind of music can fit in the game. So there's a big difference in the first part and the second part. And maybe the second part sounds a bit too vast and a bit too huge for this gameplay clip here. But if it would be presented as an independent trailer, then it would maybe fit this environment better.
Yeah. Great, thank you very much for the show introduction of your mindset. So let's watch the video and enjoy the music. If it's
nice.
Oh, sorry.
And I took inspiration from John Cage, 4 minutes 33.
I'm a MacBook user, and Windows always makes me.
Two people got that joke.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I make a remark?
Sure.
It's really funny when you start the clip, you think we're gonna listen to some smooth jazz, but it starts to make sense quite quickly, which is really funny. But I really like that. But the floor is all yours.
It's perfect. You tortured that saxophone. It's great.
I did really torture that saxophone, and I did use my saxophone a lot. Like I took some short notes, then I just pitched it down, then I stretched it, make some ambient sounds on it, and I used a black hole reverb for Eventide, because if there's any time where you could use that reverb, then it's here. Like it's a massive reverb. Oh yeah.
Very thematic as well.
And yeah, then I did some pitch shifting while I was sending it to the reverb bus, and then I only took the wet sound from the saxophone, so you could get some really interesting soundscapes. So there's some things that is saxophone, but doesn't sound like saxophone at all.
Yeah.
And now also remember what I did here. So I have this 5 meter long spring that I also just put up in my apartment. Then I have this magnetic contact microphone that I put on the spring. So it's kind of the same sounds that you can hear in Star Wars with the laser gun, like the. So then I took that sound and also did some processing with that, and And that's kind of like what you hear as the stinger when you go to the second part here. Then also layer that a bit with my saxophone to give it a more melodic feeling. And there's a lot of these sounds that are not exactly in pitch because I had to manually sit with a tuner and say, yeah, this is almost a D, but it's kind of wavy a bit. But it just decided that it's okay for this kind of feeling. It doesn't have to be pitch perfect. Then I just went for this eerie feeling, and I want to showcase, especially in the second end of the clip, how big space can feel when in it. So that was really my focus point. That in the first point, I wanted to feel more grounded with a saxophone that plays some kind of blues kind of music, space blues maybe.
This is exactly what I thought when I heard first time.
Yeah.
Like the saxophone, and if we read the description of the game, like space business manager, right? Like like a spacey bar or spacey jazz,
Space
something
sky
like
lounge
this.
with some saxophone
So
music.
my first thought was like, "Ooh, gosh, really saxophone?" And then I thought about it like, okay, that can make sense. And then when the UI screen went off, if I heard it well, then you opened some reverb, like switch the organic instrument into some spacey stuff.
Exactly, yeah. So what I mainly did to blend those two sections together was to take my saxophone track and then pretty much surf that to the black hole reverb and some other granular delay that I put on. I also used a lot of Echo Boy from Sound Toys, just messing around with the presets and then finding one I like, then tweaked a bit. So in the end of the first section, then pretty much there's 100% wet reverb and delay on it. So the saxophone changes from this well-known instrument to this out-of-world counter sound.
Yeah. And also an idea came to my mind that maybe we could send all of this music to the developer, and then suggest them to add some sky bars in the game, for example.
That's a great idea.
Okay, and the next part, by the way, I do not know you personally, but when I did some research, I thought or I understood that maybe you will go into some glitchy sci-fi style, and I also found some signature of your work there, so I think that was
It's well spotted, yeah.
Quite good.
It's very Daniel. It is.
Great. Any other questions or thoughts? Can we move on? Okay, the next one is the music from Nataliya Radina. This time we will do it in the opposite way because she's not here. I will try to represent her. So firstly, just watch the video, enjoy the music, and then we will discuss, okay? It seems Nataliya took some additional homework and she implemented. Oh, sorry, she implemented everything in the Fmod. So I've seen guys you try to figure out what is changing there and what are the triggers and parameters. So let's figure it out. I will open the notes, but please, guys, try to give some feedback first, and I will open.
Did you see what was written on the parameters?
What was it? Ship files or something, and that was the first one. Then there was UI. That was the two parameters he was using.
Yeah. So I like the. If I can just make a comment, I like the. This is the only one who took a real synth-based approach.
Yeah.
So I think it's also very interesting to see what that does to the gameplay and to. And I think what's very funny is that she like we have two different sections, but she chose to have more one base layer and add stuff when the menu closes and when the ship flies, which is actually very clever to show in such a thing that you also know how to implement things in Fmod, which I really enjoyed. And it also shows that she did not only think about what music would fit, but also how can it change when we put this into an adaptive atmosphere. And I think how she did that was really great, how it sounded, but I'm very curious what she wrote about it.
Okay, David, you wanted to tell something,
well,
I guess.
think she's the only one of us who's the most ready for implementing into a game, because this could be worked upon. It could develop, it could develop pretty practically. So it's good.
So she won the pitching session, right? You are.
Yeah, maybe.
She did, yeah, 100%.
Okay, so now please imagine I'm Nataliya. Okay, so in this example, we are using Fmod audio engine to create dynamic space ambience. Okay, usually we would use two separate Fmod events, one for music and one for ambient sounds. That's actually quite a good idea. But for illustration purposes, we are using only one here. So we have two action parameters for user interface and for ship flight. Once again, yeah, for user interface and the ship flight. Okay. Both are changing from 0 to 1 with the speed that can be customized in the game engine. That sounds cool. When the user interface is on user interface parameter 1, we have low pass filter on and less reverb. Also, we have less bass, drums, tracks are muted, and arpeggios are quieter. As soon as the player hides the interface, user interface parameter 0, bass gets louder, drums start to play, and more high-freq sounds are present. I'm just thinking, did I understood it all well? But hope you guys.
It sounds like when the interface closes, the music literally gets more space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you are then in space.
And lastly, when the ship starts to fly, ship parameter is 1. The lead instrument appears in the mix, and one of the drum tracks is playing a bit louder. I didn't recognize that, but we can maybe watch it later once again. And such tracks allow you to get more randomization in pitch, volume, distance, time of appearing of various one-shot sounds in the sound ambience. And finally, therefore, in the game, we won't have fully pre-recorded soundscape that loops. That's a quite good idea. Every time it will be slightly different and hence more alive, which leads to a more immersive experience. By the way, maybe this is also a good solution to save a lot of resources, right? When you are using just short loops and set up some randomization in Fmod, so you can have much longer musical pieces, like the player will hear much more or longer musical pieces, but especially the engine is using smaller loops. What do you think, guys, about what Nataliya wrote here?
I mean, this is a fantastic approach as a game composer to directly go into Fmod and to showcase the music in games is interactive. It's not it's not static as we see it in movies or in trailers. So the second time that you would make a video like this, then it would maybe sound different, because the music adapts to the gameplay. So I think that it's really, really clever that you went directly to Fmod and basically did the composition in there, as I understood, that you had this scatterer instrument that you put some parameters on, and the low pass filter, which also affect the music, which is just really clever done.
And I think it's also what you say, like with shorter amounts of materials, you can get longer pieces done. Yeah. And this is the kind of game where you spend hours in the same atmosphere, and you don't want it to start sounding similar as what you've heard before. So it's actually really, really clever to take an approach where you don't write a lot of music, but you get a lot of value out of what you did write. So yeah, I agree, it's super clever.
Yeah, and once the developer decide later to port the game to browser or mobile, then they will kiss Nataliya's hands like, thank you God, you proposed us this solution, right? Yeah. Great. David.
Well, it's funny because we are 3 guys here and we all wanted to show how good composers we are, and the only woman here served the purpose and served the game. It's like, it's fine.
Yeah. It's the women power, and I guess she was the only one who didn't use any arpeggio melodies, I guess. And when I've seen first time this video, my first keyword came to my mind was arpeggio. Great. Do you have any questions, guys? Maybe we can move to questions. We have like 12 minutes from now, so...
Yeah, I think we can move to Q&A session. So thank you guys, thank you Matyas, Tom, David, Daniel, thank you very much for your presentation and showcasing your work and also giving feedback for each other's job as well as Nataliya stuff. So we have 10 minutes for questions, I think we can start. So, yeah, please.
Hi. So thank you all for your presented sound tracks, and after the discussion, after we saw each other approach, if you had the possibility to return back in time and change something in what you did already, what would you change in your work, in your composition?
Okay, I'll come first. I would change the approach and I would go more for the adaptive system solutions. Because the music I did could work in that, but it would take some work to make it efficiently change and adapt in so many dynamic ways that Nataliya's piece does. That's what I would change probably.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I said, I approach it as a pitch, and in a pitch, it's you show what you can do, but it's I would also, like you say, it is possible to make it interactive, and I had it in mind with interactivity, but I would then demonstrate how that would work and say afterward, like, yeah, this is just 1 minute representation of what I did. If you want the Fmod file, hit me up and I'll email it to you. I think that's what I would change, yeah.
So when you sit here, then you can easily get imposter syndrome because there's such great composers here. So when I heard both of yours, then I just thought, oh man, I want to change my music right away. So yeah. There we go, yeah. So the thing, but I mean, one single thing like that I want to change, I want to maybe have a little bit less saxophone, to be honest, and then focus more on textures, because I think that had some kind of weak textures on something there, but it's basically it.
Well, the funny thing is that like the saxophone does make it very unique to you. Like I cannot play the saxophone and extract, torture all those sounds out of it. So while you might say, oh, it's like what you said, it's like a business lounge for space executives. It is also like, what is your unique selling point? You know, I'm a beast at the saxophone, and I can make sounds that are very weird, where it's like, that's not a saxophone, that is a saxophone. So there's a lot of saxophone, but that means there's a lot of you in there, which is, I think, a great thing in the end.
It's very nice. So,
Yeah, so thank you all. It was very curious and interesting to listen all the approach and yeah, thanks.
Thank you for the question. Next.
Okay, thank you guys for your presentation. As we talk about music as a part of audio, and you were presented as not only as a composer but as sound designers as well. My question is, what are advantages and disadvantages to be in both roles, being sound designer and composer, and how your music composing background helps you in sound design and vice versa?
It's funny that I'm holding the microphone because I did not present myself as a sound designer, but I'm going to answer the question because I do think there's a lot of value in there. But I'm going to, if it's okay, I think what the value is in sound design is a great understanding of the entire frequency spectrum and layering sounds to get something that's completely different from that. And if you would apply that to composition, that sound design knowledge, it would open so many possibilities in synthesis, in orchestration as well. Like orchestration is built on the same principles, but then you have a fixed set of instruments. So while I am not a sound designer for myself, I do see the value of knowing sound design to become a better composer, yeah, definitely. But now from the other perspective,
there's definitely some great strengths in being a sound designer and composer. First of all, there's more job opportunities, so that's a great point already there. But there's also some weakness, especially in my approach in how I make music, that I tend to make music that could sound like sound effects. So I create this ambiguity in what's a sound effect and what's music, and that works for some games and for some movies. But in other parts, didn't want to be super clear, like this sound effect should not collide with the music. But then again, if you're working on a game when you are the sound designer and the composer, then you can just be completely in control of the mix. So that's a great advantage. Then you can maybe pitch down the sound effect so it fits to the tonal spectrum of the music.
As Tom said here, he's not a sound designer, but he's an amazing orchestrator. And it's really a very similar kind of job, because you are managing frequencies and the space of the frequencies and how they can work together, holding hands. In this case, I guess, sound design deepened my knowledge in mixing and mastering, like really a lot. Because I was forced to do, in Volcanoids, when I stepped up to do the job, I was basically, I accepted to do something I didn't really want to do, not just music, not just designing sounds, but also setting those sounds ready for implementation, fixing them, fixing the bugs in the game later, and it all was a really good school, because I realized that to sell the music really well, it helps when you're a good sound designer, because you can sell exactly the parts that need to be sold. So I think, especially in today's era, it's really useful, very useful. I couldn't imagine if I was a straight concert composer. That would be really hard, because the tools are overflowing and they are filling the market with something that is becoming a demand slowly. People expect to hear something, you know. So yeah, that's my point on sound design. Yeah.
Maybe I will try to answer from maybe a different perspective. An advantage of being sound designer and composer can be also something else, like move on to some management positions or some business positions, like when you start with sound design and music composition and you know a lot of things about composition, software, production, etc. And then you move on another position like management or business salesman, then you can sell, as you told, sell your services because you know that, right? You know the tips and tricks about stuff, and also when you move to another position like creative audio director or some project manager, then you can 100% manage a team because you know what the sound designer guy has to do. So this is my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. More questions?
It seems we have to finish.
Yeah, I have a really short question from myself.
Yeah.
Like, you guys been creating music for, space game. Did you have any references in your mind during that, like movies or other games? Something to mention in particular?
For me, of course, Star Wars came to mind. That was one thing. But that's also when your first approach is like orchestral music and space. There's like the holy grail.
I was thinking about Alien first in the first place, because when the some space-related stuff is happening on the screen, I'm thinking about Alien instantly.
Yeah, that's also the other thing. But then I try to like, how do you sort of keep that legacy alive in a way, but also try to turn away from it? And that's why I went to the extended techniques and the auxiliary instruments and such. But yeah, it's often references are like a starting point, and then it's like, okay, what am I going to do with these, and how can I throw in more references to make it unique? Yeah.
Interstellar, probably. I'll be honest. I think when I saw the movie, it really influenced me because Hans Zimmer used a very different approach to score the space opera. You know, not usual. There was organs, there was orchestras, there was a lot of pizzicati. Exactly what I always thought is perfect for the space. You know, that's one thing, and that's probably the only thing because I didn't think about any other films or references. But when I see space, I immediately think Interstellar. I can't help it.
I don't have any references.
Okay, thank you then. I think we came to the end. So thank you guys for your beautiful presentation. Thank you for sharing your music with us. Thank you for sharing your experience, your feedback. So I thank you guests for attending to this event. So thank you. Applause.